All right, welcome everyone to our same-day registration question and answer Zoom session today. We're answering your questions that you may have about the SDR process in advance of the June 2023 Democratic Party primary election. And we're so happy to have so many of you as our chiefs and SDR specialists for this election joining us today. We have a number of panelists that'll be helping moderate the discussion today, including our Deputy General Registrar, Cheryl Jones. She also oversees the entire provisional process for our office. We have our Voter Services and Same-Day Registration Manager, Bushra Ardalan. And actually, that's a new title for her as of today. We're very happy for Bushra. She now manages the entire SDR process. My name is Ravi Udeshi, and I serve as our election manager now. We're in the process of hiring and filling a new election officer manager and new training manager. We'll have those folks in place in the November election. But in the meantime, I'm happy to be joined by a few folks from the election officer staff, including Jean Faubel, Jean Tenson, and Elise Yang, who will help moderate our questions and direct them to the right folks. So just a very brief reminder about some SDR basics before we open it up to your questions and answers. First off, who's eligible to do a same-day registration at a precinct on election day? As a reminder, it can be a brand new voter, someone who's never been registered in Fairfax County or the state of Virginia before, or it could be a voter who's moved, and maybe they've moved into your precinct, and now they need to do a same-day registration to be able to update their voter registration address. But either way, the key part to remember is that for any voter who does a same-day registration, they have to now live in your precinct to be eligible to vote. So SDR in practice, you're looking again, and this was all covered in your online training during the SDR workshops that many of you attended, so it's just a reminder, but it depends on whether the voter is in their old precinct where they might have been registered before, or if they've moved, are they now in their new precinct where they currently live? If the voter comes on election day to their old precinct where they're still registered but no longer live, they may still be eligible to vote routinely, especially if it's been less than a year since they've moved, and that's when you would have to consult the moving conditions. And if they're not eligible to vote in their old precinct anymore, that's when you as the chief or SDR specialist would want to encourage them to go to their correct new precinct instead. And if they do, if the voter does come to their so-called new precinct where they now live, then that's when they can complete an SDR and cast a provisional ballot. But of course, if they are still registered somewhere else, they do have the option of going to that old precinct and voting there if they want to be able to scan their ballot on the machine there. But either way, they'd still want to complete a new voter registration application so that the registration gets updated in the voter rolls. This again is a reminder of what the voter registration application looks like. You can see that there are 7 fields we've highlighted in yellow that are absolutely required for any voter registration or SDR. And then because this is a voter registration application completed as part of the SDR process, you as the chief or SDR specialist would want to use a red marker to write SDR up in the top right corner. As a quick refresher, here's how we're asking you to package and return your SDR provisional envelopes. You're just going to take, as you can see in the picture there on the left, you're going to take the completed provisional ballot envelope and put it between the voter registration application, which you just simply fold around it. And then you take that and you're going to put it in the 1A SDR envelope. So exact same as what you did, I believe, in November. And I just want to remind you that SDR, again, is a 2-step provisional process. The first part is obviously the voter registration application, but then the second part is very much a provisional ballot, and it's handled as a provisional. That voter's registration is then set aside to be processed by office staff, and if the voter is eligible to be registered and can be registered in the days after Election Day, then the electoral board is the one that adjudicates that provisional ballot. So that's just a quick refresher about the SDR process. Again, we went into much more detail in the online training that everyone was required to take for this election, as well as the SDR workshops that we had a couple weeks ago that many of you attended in person and had an opportunity to practice some of these scenarios. So now I want to give an opportunity to Cheryl Jones, our Deputy General Registrar, and to Bushra Ardalan, our Voter Services / SDR Manager, to provide you with any additional information that they'd like to share before we do open it up to your questions. If you have questions, please go ahead and use the Q&A function in Zoom at the bottom of your screen to go ahead and start submitting them. And then Jean and Elise will help us go through those questions and direct them to the right folks. All right, so go ahead now, submit any questions you may have in the Q&A, and let me turn over to Cheryl and Bushra for any updates that they may have for you. Cheryl, do you want to go first if you just want to unmute yourself? I think Cheryl's working on. She may be experiencing technical difficulties.
There we go. There we go.
Oh,
there we go.
Awesome.
Yeah, I was finding my mouse. Okay. A couple of things that we noticed or that occurred in the fall. We didn't have a problem in January. It was a small election. There weren't that many provisionals, but chiefs were handing out provisionals if the voters' record said, I don't mean provisionals. Well, yes, provisionals. If the voters' record said that they were an overseas voter, or if they were an inactive voter, those people don't get provisionals unless they also are in the wrong precinct or there's some other mitigating factor. But if it's just that, don't look in your what ifs. Those people don't get provisional ballots. It's only if there's an issue, of course, you know, if absentee and so forth, and that's in your what ifs. Same day registrations, the same thing. We had chiefs issuing same day registrations for people who didn't live in their precincts. We don't know what was going on. Just because a voter comes into your precinct and they're a new voter, they can't be issued a provisional ballot. They can't register to vote in that election. They can register to vote, and we'll just process it after the election. They'll be fine for the next election. But the law says a voter has to vote in their precinct where they live. Because for same day registration, you're combining two things. The voter registration, and that's always going to be good if the form is filled out correctly. But then the question is whether their vote will count. And if they're not in the right precinct, the law says that that vote, just unless the board overrides it for some reason, it can't count. So be sure that voter is in your precinct. And that they're not in the poll book. If they're in your poll book, there's no reason to do an SDR. They can fill out an application to change their address, but that's not an SDR. That goes in your regular number 8 envelope. So don't mark it SDR, and we'll process those after the election, and they'll be good for the next election.
Sure, I just want to follow up on that one and make sure we've all understood that correctly. So is that the situation where a voter goes to their so-called old precinct where they're still registered?
Right.
They've moved somewhere new, but they're still eligible to vote in their old precinct. And in that situation, is that where you're saying that they would vote normally, not do an SDR because they can still cast a ballot on the scanner, and then separately just complete a standard voter registration application?
Right. And they're not required to, but it's the easiest thing. They can go on their phone and they could do it online. They could do it at home. But if they do an application there, it just goes in the regular number 8, and we'll process those after the election, and then their address will be changed for November. Yeah. Do you have anything, Bushra?
Yes. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for all your hard work. And I just want to let you know we are here all to support you now on election day and anytime. Please reach out to us if you have any question. For SDR, the most important thing is the application be complete. We don't want to receive incomplete application, missing some information. At that time, we need to deny that application. And there is no cure processing. When the application has been denied, that's it. The vote will not be counted. So please make sure the application, when you hand the application to the voter, when they fill it out, please double check that question number 1, 2, 3, and signature has been submitted completely. When you're handing out the provisional envelope and they vote and they complete the envelope, provisional envelope, please double check it, the information matching together. So the address they provided on the application match the address that they put it on their provisional envelope. The last 4 digits of the social is matching the application, and they sign it. Envelope, they sign the envelope, also the application. That's the most important thing, to have the both application and provisional envelope be completely correctly filled out. And then for us, when it's come to our office, we will go through it and we process the SDR part, then we process the provisional part. And as I said, we are here. Any question from now later on election day? If you could not find voter on the poll book, please call us. Sometimes you cannot find the voter. Maybe they registered after the close of the book. So reach out, call us. We will look. If we couldn't find it at that time, we can tell you you are eligible to do the SDR for that voter. Thank you again.
Thank you, Bushra. And just to double down on the point that you made, yeah, I think it was just heartbreaking for us sometimes to see the situations in November where a voter may have omitted one required field. And that's something that you all as chiefs and election officers would hopefully have double checked and helped the voter make sure they have that information, because otherwise that application couldn't be accepted and that SDR couldn't be ultimately counted by the electoral board. Yeah, so please, by all means, make sure of that. So thank you very much, Cheryl and Bushra. Let's turn to the questions that all of our wonderful chiefs and SDR specialists are submitting. I see a couple of questions here in the Q&A, and then we can also open it up to anyone that wants to ask their question on camera as well. So the first question I see is from Karen. Karen's asking, are there red markers in the kits to use to write SDR on the envelope? So I can answer that one to start. So the answer is yes, we are providing red pens or markers in everyone's black kits. We want to make sure you have all the supplies that you need to be able to follow our instructions. So yes, you will get that red pen or marker to be able to write SDR at the top right corner of a voter registration application. The next question I see is from Donnell Sawyer. The question is, does a voter who completed an SDR and provisional ballot ever find out if their vote was counted? So Cheryl, Bushra, I'll turn to you for that one.
Yes, we don't tell voters that their ballot was counted, but we do send a letter to all the voters whose ballots weren't counted. And the way the voters can find out if their ballot was counted is simply logging into the citizen portal, through the state Department of Elections website. And that's the same portal where they can go in and register to vote, change their registration, apply for an absentee ballot, and just see their voter data. And in there, it will show that they voted in that election. And of course, the easiest thing is they can call us. Yeah, call us up and we can tell them. But if they don't get a letter from us, then their ballot was counted. I realize it's kind of reverse, but we do inform people whose ballots weren't counted.
Cheryl, is there any provision for a voter to proactively contact the office and find out if their ballot was counted? Could
Sure,
they, for example, call us a week after election day?
Right, they can call us, they can email us, and we'll let them know. Yeah, that's not a problem. Yeah.
Terrific. Bushra, I have a question from Bill Taylor here for you. Bill's asking, did you say that if a voter is not in the poll book, then that the election officer should contact the office?
Yes, please. Yeah, because probably the voter maybe spelling of the name is wrong. Sometimes they change their name. Sometimes it's registered after close of the book. Sometimes, the way they search that on the poll pad, we can find them easily. So definitely, if the voter is not on the poll book, please call us.
And this is if they're not on the poll book, but they say they're registered.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. If they say if they just say I moved into town last week and I need to register to vote, then that's different. But if they say no, I voted here before, or I registered to vote, I know I registered to vote, you should have me on the poll book, then call Bushra.
And if they said they went to DMV and I applied, so that's too.
Perfect. Okay. I see some questions that we did receive in advance of this, that when people registered. So I'm going to go through a few of those. So let's see here. I see a question from Urban. Does the SDR process work as it did last year? So generally speaking, at the precincts, yes, the process is more or less the same as it was in the November 2022 election. There is one change, and that actually goes to a question that Carl Stout submitted. Other than having the registrant fill out the envelope and the registration form, what logs do I need to fill out? So great question. There is one change as it relates to the provisional ballot log, and I can share a little bit about that one. So if you all recall, if you helped with the SDR process in November, we asked that you as election officers complete the paper provisional ballot log, as we've done for many years, and then to take that information and copy it into the electronic provisional ballot log to help us expedite the process of processing almost 7,000 provisional SDRs that were submitted on election day. We want to make things a little bit easier for you this time. So what we've done now is we've changed our procedures on this. We only need you to submit the electronic provisional ballot log that's on the admin tablets. We don't need you to also fill out the paper form. Now, if for any reason, if the electronic log is not working for you, feel free to call Tech Command for help on election day, but otherwise we're still providing you with a backup paper ballot log. So it's very important. We're still giving you the paper log as a backup if you need it, but otherwise, as long as you submit it electronically, that's all we need you to do. We want to reduce the amount of duplicative work that you may have to do. Let me look here. Let's see, Barbara Mutz asked, in November, my chief said to phone the office about any voter not found in the poll pad. Are we supposed to do that this time? I think Cheryl and Busher just kind of answered that, that generally speaking, if a voter can't be found in the poll pad, then sure, you're welcome to call the office. But often that might just be a voter who is not yet registered and they can just do an SDR then. One of the things that is going to be a little bit different in terms of the provisional reason codes that we want to make sure you're all apprised of. This isn't a change in policy or procedure, but just a change from how you all have handled in the past. Is in the past, you may, and I get it, you may not remember any of this off the top of your head, but when a voter does a provisional ballot, you had to select one of the reason codes on the back of the provisional envelope. Reason codes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, depending on what the situation was. Well, reason codes 1 and 2 generally have to do with a voter not being in the poll book. Almost all of those situations have now been eliminated due to the introduction of same-day registration. So this is going to be in the updated Chief's notebook and in the Chief's briefing, but generally speaking, you're not going to need to use reason codes 1 and 2 for provisional ballots anymore. If a voter's not in the poll book, they should do a same-day registration. In the situation that a voter truly believes they are registered and they're omitted an error from the poll book and that you think you might want to use reason codes 1 or 2, that's when we'd ask you to call the office, and Busher and her team would help take a look and see what's going on with that voter before you select that reason code. Let's see here. So we got a couple of questions in the registration about the addresses for voters and what's the quickest way to determine a voter's congressional district. So for that part, it's the same process as it was in November. You're going to use the moving conditions chart in the what ifs to evaluate each voter and see when did they move and are they still eligible to vote routinely in their old precinct. And the general rule of thumb is a voter gets about a year from the time that they've moved. That's not a hard and fast rule. You always want to, of course, look at the what ifs and the moving conditions chart, but that's generally what the majority of situations fall into. If it's been less than a year, then they can probably still vote in their old precinct. And in that case, then the voter has the option, right? They can either go to their old precinct and vote routinely there and hopefully do a voter registration application to update their registration. Or if they show up in their new precinct, they can do a same-day registration there now. So again, we make no judgment on which one a voter should or could do. It's simply you give the voter the options and it's their decision. Let's see here. And I love this question from Tamara. Will there be a checklist so we don't forget to dot all the I's and cross all the T's? Yes, absolutely. So there is a checklist, a provisional checklist in your Chief's notebook that goes to all the situations. So there's a standard provisional checklist, and there's also one for the SDR process. So depending on what kind of voter you're assisting, you just follow the correct checklist, and that will help you make sure you've done all the things correctly. I know I was speaking with someone that works in our office as one of our trainers and our rovers. He actually was the chief at our largest precinct in the November election. And one of the things that he pointed out that's helped him as he's led some of our training classes since then is also that for him and his precinct, the majority of SDR voters were folks who were not yet registered in Virginia or in Fairfax County. So they were just doing a simple, it was a very simple process, and there was no moving conditions chart to evaluate for them. It was simply, great, have them do a voter registration application and do a provisional ballot, and that's it. Very simple and straightforward. And that may be the case for all of you as well. The other part of it is, because this is a primary election in June, turnout's usually much lower. It'll be our first primary with SDR, so we'll see how that goes. But in November, we had about an average of approximately, I think it was 25 total provisional ballots, including SDRs in each precinct. In this election, even with anticipating a significant increase for SDR, I'm thinking it might be an average of about 4 for the day in a precinct on average. Obviously, if you're in a bigger precinct, it could be more. If you're in a smaller precinct, it could be fewer, but somewhere around that number. So we think it's going to be less stressful. I think that covers most of the questions I see in the pre-submitted questions. I see a few new questions have come into the question and answers. Mary asked, will there be a specific number for us to contact you about a person not being in the poll book? And should we call the day of? So I think I can answer that one. Yes, absolutely. The very first page of the Chief's Notebook has the different phone numbers that you can call for issues on election day. And one of those numbers is a voter support number that goes directly to Bushra and her staff. And so if you have a question, you can call that number and they'll be able to help you resolve any voter situation, including a question about a provisional or SDR voter. Let's see. Jean, I see you submitted something here. Do you want to share with everyone what you mentioned? Jean works in our office as one of our election officer team staff and in our operations group.
Sure. Just touching on what you mentioned a moment ago, Ravi, we did add SDR to the front of the notebook, that inside cover where it says voter registration, call this number for various reasons. We now also say, call that number for SDR questions. So the provisional ballot envelope where you put your reason codes here, Ravi was talking about, we're not using reason codes 1 and 2 at all for SDR people. The notebook has the checklist and it goes through step by step, and we say to use reason code 6 other on the envelope, and then you write in the word SDR. So reason codes 1 and 2 should be incredibly rare going forward because we have SDR now. Use reason code 6 other for SDR.
Perfect. Thank you, Jean. I see a question here from Tamara. It's a question for Cheryl or Bushra. Does the voter have to include their entire social security number, or can they fill in the spaces with X's and just put in the last 4 numbers?
So for voter registration application, it must have full SSN. For the envelope is last 4 digit. So on voter registration application, please double check that full social security number has been provided. But in case, and it's very rare, some voter, they do not have social security number at all. At that time, they need to check the box, no social security has been issued. But this is very, very rare. So on application, again, full social security number is required. If not, we will deny that application. On the envelope, provisional envelope is last 4 digit of SSN.
Perfect. Thank you, Bushra. I see an anonymous person submitted a question. When will the Chief's Notebook be available online for review? It should be ready tomorrow or Wednesday, and we'll email it to all of you as soon as it's ready. So we're just cleaning up the final tweaks and getting it published online very soon. I did see that we got some questions from Robert and Nancy about the moving conditions chart and how to determine a voter's congressional district. So I wanted to take a moment to just provide a refresher for any of you that weren't able to attend our SDR workshops. We covered that during the SDR workshops. It was obviously part of the online training as well. Give me just a moment here as I pull open my screen and share that with you all. Let's see. If you can see my screen, give me a thumbs up. Okay, good. So for the moving conditions, one thing we've done for this election is we've actually updated the moving conditions chart that's going to be in your Chief's Notebook a little bit to make it a little bit simpler, we hope, to read and evaluate. If you recall before, it had about 12 different options, but really there's only 5 different possibilities for what a voter situation might be. So we kind of grouped those together and color-coded those to make it a little bit easier to look at. But it still works the same way the old moving conditions chart did. So you can imagine that you still have those lines and you look at a situation. And so let's say, for example, what if a voter has moved outside of the county or to a different congressional district, still within Virginia, and let's say they moved on or before November 3rd, 2020. Well, great, then we know we're in the 3rd column over here, or 4th, depending if we start at the very left, and it's down here at the very bottom. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but essentially in that situation, great, a voter can do an SDR in the precinct where they now live. So again, this is part of the updated Chief's Notebook. You'll have this. We'll also provide you with just a separate color printout of this to evaluate the situations. As it relates to the different congressional districts, I just want to remind everyone that the way that works is you're going to search for voters using the My Neighborhood app on your admin tablet. And using the My Neighborhood app, it's going to show you some information about the individual's voting precinct. So in this case, there's a search done for a particular address, and we can see that that resulted in the voting precinct of Fair Oaks 848. That's the only information we want you to pull from the My Neighborhood app on the admin tablet. To determine if the voter has now moved to a different congressional district, you can't use the information in the My Neighborhood app. It's, you know, if you keep scrolling down, it'll show you the pictures of the elected representatives. But those individuals were elected almost 2 years ago or more now, and they're still under the old district lines. This is the first election this November, where we're going to be electing new individuals under the new redistricting lines. So what you need to do then is to take a look at your precinct locator document. It's also often called the directory of polling places, precincts, and districts. We just internally call it the precinct locator. And on here, this is where you can look over and take a look at a given precinct. So this voter, for example, maybe they moved from precinct 105 Fairview, which we can see is in the 11th congressional district. We're working on making this process simpler and easier in the future. We're trying to build an integrated tool, an all-in-one tool on your admin tablets, but for this election, it's still this process. So let me just say that again. So to determine if a voter has moved into a different congressional district, what you'll need to do is to look up their address using the My Neighborhood app, right? And then figure out what precinct that is associated with that address, and then take that precinct information over to your precinct locator, which you get as a printout and also as a PDF on the admin tablet, and see what congressional district is that associated with. And that will then tell you which column of the moving conditions chart they fall into. Is this complicated a little bit? Yes, I get it. And if you're not sure, call the office on election day. No matter what, we don't want a voter to ever be disenfranchised or to fill out the wrong type of ballot. So by all means, call us if you're not sure. We have no problem with that. So that's just a quick refresher on the moving conditions chart and the precinct locator document. Let's see here if we've got any other questions.
Ravi, can I add something, please?
Please.
So if you could not find the address in My Neighborhood, please call us. Sometimes it's better if you could not find the address, even though the most addresses that you cannot find, and they have addresses like Fairfax, Fulcher, Alexandria, probably is in the other jurisdiction like City of Fairfax, City of Alexandria, but please call us. And one address that you cannot find in My Neighborhood is for Ford Boulevard. You cannot find any addresses. So please, for any address in Ford Boulevard, you must call us to give you exact precinct.
Bushra, what precinct is Fort Belvoir? Is that 618, something like that?
Is Gunston is I think three precinct we have in that area. So the city, if it was Fort Boulevard, the city, call us. You cannot find it in My Neighborhood.
Okay, so just to recap for everyone, let me make sure I got this right, Bushra. So if a voter mentions that they live in or near Fort Belvoir and you can't find them on the My Neighborhood app, call the office. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the keywords there are Fort Belvoir. Call
The
you if
city.
it's Fort Belvoir. The city.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. Let's see here. I see a question from Urban. Do you expect a lot of confusion from voters who are not aware that they may have been redistricted and are now voting for candidates with whom they are unfamiliar? Urban, it's a possibility. The redistricting lines went into effect last year. So last November, we went through kind of some of the same situations. We expect it to be less of a concern this year. I think for the most part, people know that they've been redistricted. They know if their polling places changed. And ultimately this year, they'll be voting on whoever their new elected representatives are. It's, the process was just a little bit different because of delays related to COVID and when the decennial census occurred, but working through it. I don't recall any significant issues in the November election, so I think it should be fine. Let's see here. I think we're wrapping up. We only have a few more questions. If you have any questions that you haven't asked, now's your chance to submit them. Tamara asked, in the future, once we use up these green envelopes, will there be envelopes that have a pre-printed SDR code on them? I'm assuming instead of checking number 6 and writing SDR. What I can tell you is Cheryl and I are in a work group with the state about the provisional process and the provisional envelopes, and it's not final yet, I don't think, but we expect that there will be a new an updated design of a provisional envelope in the November election. So not a lot to share about that just yet, but we do expect that that new envelope design will take into account the SDR process in a much better way. Neil, you had a question about the chief kit pickup process. We're getting ready to send an email to all chiefs about that today, about some changes. Just, for anyone that's curious though, the short answer is we will no longer need you to come in next week to pick up your black kits. Instead, you're going to pick up your black kits and your poll pads on the day before the election. It's a change. We're sending a more detailed email about that to everyone, and you'll be able to start signing up for time slots soon. Did anyone have questions about the provisional or SDR process that they wanted to ask us on camera? Now's your chance to do that as we start wrapping up here. So if you'd like to go ahead and raise your hand using the Zoom function to raise your hand, and then we can call on you to do that. And if no one has any additional questions, then we'll wrap up here in a moment. As we're waiting for that, I see Barbara submitted a question. Sounds like this is a question for perhaps Cheryl. Is a phone number really required on the provisional envelope? It is not a required field on the SDR application. We had someone in November who said he had no phone, and so they're trying to figure out how to handle that.
Yeah, a phone number is not required. That's just if we had a question or for some reason we could call the voter. It's not required. No.
Okay. Excellent. So that looks like it's the end of the questions in
I was going to say, since I've got my microphone open, could I just add a couple more things? As you all will find out from looking in the Chief's manual, you don't need to complete the paper log this year. There was the green paper log that was inside, or that went back inside the 1A envelope. We're doing away with the paper logs and just going with the digital log on the admin tablet. The only reason you would use the paper log is if the admin tablet broke, it wasn't functional, the log wasn't functional or something. Then you'd go back and do that. And there's more information in the Chief's manual on that. And please fill out that digital log completely. That feeds immediately into our database, and it makes our processing our provisional ballots so much more efficient, because the data that you enter it creates a page for that voter. And so all that information is filled in, and we don't have to go and type things in and risk making errors and so forth. And then I know in the past, the chiefs have said, oh, well, we can't remember if we entered this one or not. And, they were concerned about duplicates and leaving some out. Just put a big old check mark on that provisional envelope. When you've entered it into the log, put a check mark on it. And that way you'll know, because sometimes it may be too busy. You can't enter that envelope immediately because you've got people lined up. We understand that, but then there'll be a quiet period in an hour, and then you can go back and you can check all your provisional ballots and add them, get check marks on them. And that may be a system that works for you, but it would be very helpful if you get all that information added on the digital log.
Excellent. Thank you, Cheryl. I don't see any other SDR provisional questions in the question and answers. Does anyone have any other questions live? I didn't see anyone that raised their hand to do that. So if not, then we may be about to finish up right now. Looks like Sarah may have a question. Sarah, go ahead.
Hi, I was wondering about the Juneteenth holiday and setups. Have you heard if there's going to be any problem with schools or other polling sites getting access on a holiday?
Yeah, that question's kind of separate. We're focused on provisional SDR today, but just in very short, no, there won't be any issues. We've already coordinated with the schools. Every school is going to allow for site setup on that Monday. So again, we're happy to answer any questions about setup and that process separately, but no issues. All right, so with that, I don't see any other questions. I don't see anyone else with their hand raised. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much to Cheryl and Bushra. They are the subject matter experts about the provisional and the SDR process in our office. Their teams are the folks that will be assisting you on election day and answering your calls. So by all means, please feel free to give them a call on election day, and they would be happy to answer all the complex situations that you may end up with. And then separate from that, be on the lookout for an email from us. We'll be sending you all an email today or tomorrow with a recording of this session and with more information about things to get ready for election day, including the updated pickup process. All right, thanks a lot, everyone. We really appreciate your time today and have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.